and welcome to part 3 of our teacher series on how to set up debate clubs. So, today, what we're looking at is best practice for practice debates. So, basically, when you set up practice debates, whether that's lunchtime, after school, or even friendlies with other schools, I think it's really useful to get very good at quickly setting them up in an efficient way that helps kids have fun and learn and isn't too time consuming, and therefore you're sort of maximizing utility. I think this is one of the most crucial skills that a sort of aspiring debate coach or a teacher who wants to do a lot of debating and public speaking can learn. And I think it's one of the things that I most quickly notice when I'm involved in schools, especially if it's one of those lunchtimes where you have 30 kids coming along and a few teachers involved, so maybe you have 3 debates happening concurrently in 3 classrooms. Just the ability to kind of sort all that out quickly. For me, it's just happened through experience because I've been doing this so long, but I think there are a few things you can do that just make it so much easier and such a better use of time. So, as we said before, keeping it simple is really, really key. For me, I find 3 on 3 is a nice number. This is purely from experience. I have no sort of scientific reasoning behind this, other than to say that I think when it's 2 on 2, um, it maybe feels a little bit less like a team and more just like a partnership. And the debate is very short, it sometimes feels. I think with 4 on 4, what you tend to find is that kids are repeating each other by the third speeches and by the fourth speeches completely. Many of you may know that one of the most common competitive debating formats, BP, does have 8 students, but it's 4 teams of 2. I think that's a great format, and we are going to discuss BP in the future. But initially, in those first few weeks, that format can be quite confusing, especially if you don't understand it very well. So, if you don't really know what BP is or how it's set up, or even if you're just a little unsure, I think just having a prop team of 3, proposition for the motion, government, whatever you want to call them, and an opposition op team of 3 is really useful. And then just having the first speaker from prop speak, then stop, then the op speak, the first speaker from op come up and speak, and then go back to prop and back to op and back to prop and back to op. I think it's nice and simple, it's quite intuitive, and it works. Um, don't worry about summary speeches. This is a thing that, again, a lot of teachers and some students seem to focus on is, oh, should we do a summary speech? And, like, my answer is always if you want. If a student thinks they know what a summary speech is and they want to do a summary speech when speaking third, cool. But if they don't, they can just give a regular speech. I don't waste time teaching summary speeches in the first like 3 or 4 or really even 8 practice debates. I just don't think it's that important. It's also quite easy to teach once students know what debates look like. So I don't really start worrying about summary speeches. I also don't start with POIs. The main reason for this is that POIs have a tendency to derail debates when the debates are full of novices. The problem with POIs is that speakers, even when you tell them to only ever take one POI in a speech, take more than one, and they're not very good at thinking on their feet, and they're already a bit unsure of what they're going to say, and so they end up just taking the POI after 5 seconds, or even if you give them protected time, 5 seconds into unprotected time, and then they spend overtime responding to POIs, and the debate just gets really messy. My general experience of POIs is once students can give a speech without POIs that lasts a minute to 2 minutes, and they've all given a good 3 or 4 speeches, and they kind of know what debates look like, that's a really good time to start introducing POIs, but really make it clear to speakers that they should only take one POI per speech, maximum. That's a good rule for competition, and it's a good rule for practice. It stops their speeches being derailed by POIs. When you start running practice debates, given a 2 minute maximum is great for practice debates. That means that a debate actually only takes about a quarter of an hour if you have 6 speakers, with a few minutes here and there for nonsense. Spend 5-10 minutes giving some feedback. You have 5-10 minutes for preparation time, and that's 45 minutes, which is most people's lunchtime once everyone's through the door, and with a little extra time at the end. The other thing is that at the start, if you're students are 15 or below and they aren't very natural or very gregarious, you might find that very few of them even speak for a full minute in the first few weeks. And so having the 2 minute maximum just means that the few students who might speak for 5 minutes um, aren't making the students who are only speaking for 25 seconds look really bad or feel really bad. And it also allows you to control the timing of a debate a lot more. I would also say that there are some students who are going to speak for as long as you let them, but they're just rambling. And you do want to, with those students, it's a different thing you want to work on. It's not coming up with arguments, it's saying relevant things and prioritizing relevant things and not going off on mad tangents. So I like 2 minutes. You probably will find that, particularly for older students, they very quickly start to hit that 2 minute maximum and could do longer debates. And then it's worth expanding it 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, all the way up to 5 minutes. I wouldn't go above five. It's just really hard to, because that's already 30 minutes of speaking time in a 3-on-3 debate and 50 minutes of prep time. How long do you have at lunch? Not much longer, right? Um, so I would say 2 minutes maximum is a good place to start. This house would, I put this in because motions at most debating competitions are prefaced this house would, this house believes, or perhaps sometimes this house regrets or this house supports. That's just fancy debating parlance for we would do this thing. So saying this house would just means we would do this thing. This house is just whoever's debating. It's just fancy wording, but I do think it's a good thing to use right from day one because that way it's just one less thing that students will not be thrown by when they do competitions. So, for example, instead of just being like, we would ban zoos, this house would ban zoos. So, what should you focus on? Um, Focus on not letting other speakers or particularly an audience or judges talk when someone has the floor, when someone's giving their speech. Really focus on that politeness of when the speaker is speaking, we are all listening. It's okay for the other team to sort of whisper because they're maybe helping each other with points, but people should in general be listening to the person who's speaking. They should also use their prep time effectively. And this is something you'll notice a lot with kids is you give them 15 minutes to prepare arguments and like that's not possibly long enough. And then within 30 seconds you're hearing them talk about something completely unrelated to the motion. You know, like someone said something last period or did they have the test or have you seen that TikTok video? And you're like, it you're not even using the prep time I'm giving you and you're telling me it's not enough. So really just don't tell them what to say. Don't like helicopter them by like standing around and being like, "What are you gonna say? What are you gonna say, kids? What are you gonna say?" But be in the room, and if you hear that their preparation is just not preparation anymore, say that to them. And if they're like, "We're done," they're never done. Be like, "Do you have 3 points each?" And are all of them really well explained in terms of why they're true and why they're important? And do you all have examples? And have you rehearsed with each other and given each other feedback? No, then you're not done. Do all that. Um, you never need to give them more than 20 minutes of prep time. 15 is a good number. 10 is okay. The reason is they just will not use it. Like not for all, not at the start. They'll if you give them 10 minutes prep time or 40 minutes prep time, you will get roughly the same standard of speech because they'll mess around. Yeah, focus on getting them to explain their points. We've talked about that before. The easiest way to say that is whatever point they have, they should try to explain why it's true and why it's important. That's if they can explain those two things, it's usually quite a good point. Honestly, lots of positive encouragement. Just not the camera there. Apologies. Debating is hard. They'll be nervous even if they don't show it, and you want them to keep coming back. For any feedback you give them, it should be overwhelmingly things they're doing well and positive reinforcement, not things to work on. One or two things to work on is more than enough. It's also not just about being nice. Factually, kids don't really know where the goalposts are when they start debating, so they won't necessarily know that they did a thing well. You know, if they had really good structure or they were really clear or really audible, they might not know that or know that that matters. So it is important to tell them what they're doing well. And lastly, like try to wean them off reading aloud or just try to stop them doing it as soon as possible. What we don't want is students writing out their speeches word for word and then reading them aloud. That's not debating, it's not public speaking, it's essay writing and reading aloud. Notes are great. I would never try and give a whole speech or a debate speech without any notes. I've done it before. It's not as good, but equally, I would never ever write out a speech word for word, and I don't think anyone should do that. So, with your students, really try to encourage them. Yeah, notes are good, but they've got to trust themselves to think off the cuff and to speak off the cuff, not to read aloud. Yeah, the four things I really say about feedback, as we've touched upon, you got to be encouraging. It has to be very simple. It is going to be repetitive because they're not going to listen to you. And I would give feedback to the whole group rather than picking on individuals. It's quicker, it's more effective, and it makes students feel less sort of picked on. If you have spare students, as in you've picked 6 students to debate and you had 12 in the classroom, so you get 6 students left over, they can be judges and just tell them to take notes, try to figure out who explained their points better or had the better points, and then have a vote at the end. That can be kind of fun that way. It just keeps them paying attention and it keeps them involved. They can also, if you want, you could assign a few of them to help teams come up with arguments and rehearse, prepare arguments, but they just don't speak. Either role is great. Just give them something to do, to try and keep them at least engaged during the debate, if not for the whole session. As judges, they don't have much to do in prep time, but they won't mind messing around for a little bit with their friends. But it's good for them to be doing something debatey every time they turn up. Common errors I see in setting up debates is changing things too often, changing the structure or the format or how many people speak week to week. You want kids to kind of get into a routine and to understand like what's expected of them, what's doing it, make it comfortable. Debating is uncomfortable enough without constant changes. Um, Another sort of mistake I see is everyone turns up to the lunchtime and then you ask for volunteers to speak. The teacher sort of says, okay, who wants to speak this week? You don't want to do that. For one thing, you're going to end up with the same kids volunteering every week, and you might end up with no kids volunteering if you're in a sort of school where like looking enthusiastic is uncool. Just pick 6 kids yourself every week. Similarly, don't helicopter coach during prep time. Don't stand right next to the team preparing and see what they're saying. Don't give them arguments. Don't tell them what to say. You've kind of got to let them sink or swim a little bit. You can give a few pointers here and there, but I'd really take a very hands-off approach in debating. Just let them mess it up a bunch of times, and give them some feedback at the end of each debate and see how they're doing after a few weeks. You've just kind of got to let them get their feet wet. So yeah, last thing, progression. When you've been doing this a few months, of course, it's time to start thinking about how to make these debates more challenging. The first and most obvious one is expand that 2-minute cap, as we talked about. Introduce POIs. If you don't know what POIs are, don't worry, we're going to talk about them in a future video. Get them to start focusing on rebuttal. You can start moving your feedback from just explanation, prioritization, and structure to remember to listen to the other team and try responding to what they said. You can start introducing summary speeches if you want, and you can have slightly more complex debates. Don't go crazy, but you can have more complex debates than this house would ban alcohol. Depending on what your kids are interested in, you can have slightly more complex debate topics. So next time we'll be looking at the BP format, at why we like this format so much, and why we like content-heavy formats over style formats. We think that's a really, really key thing to understand as a coach, not just to believe and accept, but to understand the underlying reasoning. So I hope you'll join us for that. But until next time, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, comment below if you have any questions, and give us an email if you'd like us to do any coaching at your school. Until next time, take care, keep debating. Bye now.